one of the things that people like about private credit is there's a certain amount of certainty in transactions, whereas banks, it's laborious. It takes time. It can be a challenge. And then you might not even have a solution there for yourself. I couldn't even imagine 3 years ago, people asking during an interview, if you had a work from home policy. It just would have been something they'd be like, I'm not touching that. 1-2 days a week, work from home, get some flexibility in your life. That's there. And that's probably going to stay to some degree.
Adam Rice, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Very excited to speak with you. A little nervous as well. But yeah, if you could just maybe start off, tell me a little bit about what you do, where you work, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Yeah. Well, happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. It's funny. Worked with you a couple times now, and it's actually the first time I've seen your face. So, but I guess that's the way the world is now. So I work at Park Cities Asset Management. I've been here about 3 years, a little over 3 years. It was really a great opportunity for me to join. It was a good point for me in my career, to come over to a place that was pretty young in its life cycle. But had, from where I sat and what I was looking at, a lot of upside, a lot of potential for me to kind of go in and apply a lot of the things that I've been able to gather over my career into a kind of a related industry, but somewhat new to me. So Park Cities itself is specialty finance. It's private credit, effectively. We're a lender. The essence of what we do is we go out, we raise capital, and we deploy it as debt. It's really that simple in its most basic form. It's interesting. I haven't worked necessarily in private credit before, but I touched many sectors that kind of would have touched it. So it was a good opportunity for me to come over, learn a little bit of a new business model, and then try to apply my skill set to help a business grow. And so Park Cities has, underlying credits, effectively counterparties that we go out and, it's deals that we source, whether it's through relationships or, could be through really any, especially nowadays with so much technology out there. We have folks reaching out to us on a regular basis. So it could be, deals that are as low as a couple $1 million potentially, up to tens of millions. So that's where we are as far as that's kind of I would say our sweet spot's probably somewhere between $5 and $25 million as it is. We've done deals that are substantially larger. We've also done deals that are substantially smaller, but effectively what we do is we evaluate the underlying prospective borrower. Due diligence is performed from our portfolio management guys here, who are pretty sharp, really know what they're doing. They evaluate the companies, what they're trying to accomplish. If we feel like we fit that need, or it could be a case where we're not necessarily exactly what they need. They might need another I suppose solution or group that we can we're always happy to help facilitate that. So really, we're just a credit group that really tries to fill the void of where banks aren't going to operate or don't operate, or a lot of times we find credits that are maybe too small for some of the bigger private credit type groups. So that's where we operate today, and there's a lot of opportunity. So it's been great, and we've had an opportunity to grow substantially since I got here.
I was doing some research this morning and last night prior to our interview, just reading about private credit in general, and then your growth. I think Park Cities has been around about 4 years now, and very quick growth. So, I mean, generally speaking, what do you see? What are the opportunities right now, and then kind of what are maybe the general headwinds? We have rising interest rates, inflation. Does that impact demand for private credit at all, or is there more demand, or kind of what are you seeing out there?
So I came here at the end of the summer in 2019. Of course, COVID hit 7-8 months later. So it's like, I feel like, and when I talk about what we do and how we do it, it's like we've constantly been, I learned everything pretty quick, right? Like try to get my feet under me at about 6 months here. And then I feel like I've just been describing it as we've been in a world of change for 2.5 years, right? And just when you think things are calming down, something happens, whether it's economic, whether it's, you've got a lot of political issues, you've got, you've even got a war, over in Ukraine and Russia that's been driving up gas prices as an example, which really impacts consumer spending. So, when you look at the overall environment, it feels like things have changed substantially, but I think that from our perspective with inflation specifically and interest rates rising, I think it's bearing out as we've seen. I think that's actually going to increase or could really increase the demand for private credit groups such as ourselves. When banks are out there and they have, typically people who can go to banks and get loans or find solutions, because these are third parties that they're looking for substantial amounts of financing, and obviously 100 basis points on an interest rate is going to be meaningful to them. So if they can go to banks, they're going to go to banks. Well, as our cost of capital is somewhat static, as we see interest rates rise, we're seeing the gap between a bank and us close, right? And I think one of the things that people like about private credit is there's a certain amount of certainty in transactions, whereas banks, it's laborious, it takes time, it can be a challenge, and then you might not even have a solution there for yourself. So I do think that we're going to see, whether it's with us or other private credit groups, because there's big ones out there. There's big ones that fill gaps that we don't fill. You're going to see an increase in the demand for private credit, or especially as I would assume, and I think it's bearing out, that there's going to be a withdrawal. There's going to be some groups that just pull back and say, I'm going to call a timeout. So you're going to see some of the liquidity is not there. You're going to, so that creates opportunity, right? So I think we're going to see that for ourselves. I think it's bearing out a little bit, but I feel pretty confident about where we sit and what we do right now.
That's great. So shifting gears a little bit, I was reading about some of the bigger banks feeling like they missed out on this space, and coming up quickly with plans to get into the space. Park Cities is in Dallas. Lots of companies are coming here. Demand for talent, I'm sure. What have you seen in that space? I guess specifically within within private credit, and then maybe just in Dallas in general. What have you been seeing out there, and how do you build a high performing team? Yes.
I mean, that's probably one of the bigger challenges right now. And, I think I'm certain that you've seen that. You've probably seen the challenges others have gone through, in particular over, I would say, the last year and a half or so. For us in particular, it'd been quite some time since, my prior company, it was a 10,000 person company. We had plenty of resources, a whole HR team. There was, but the game hadn't changed yet. There was, we were still kind of operating under the pre-COVID rules of, employees kind of needed you more than you needed them. And so you felt like when you were out there trying to source talent, you could find really good talent pretty quick and you could move on it. Well, when I came over here, it's probably about 2 years before I had to, maybe actually probably about 2.5 years before we really got to the point where I needed some additional resources. We have a really steady team over here. We have almost no turnover. So there was, I didn't have a need for talent other than growing into it. So we finally get to the point where we needed some talent, and we started evaluating that in the early spring, and I realized the game had changed completely. Absolutely completely. It was turned on its head. It wasn't just that it was it was hard to even get resumes in the door. I was stunned by it. And then so when you saw a resume, you quickly realized if I even want a shot at this person, I need to talk to him now. So, right, like trying to talk to people quickly. And really it was a market. It was not a buyer's market. We I almost had to really listen to what they wanted, and which is great. It's actually a good way to, I suppose, learn a little bit yourself, right? I always felt like I was pretty good about understanding what motivated people and what they wanted, and try to retain talent and do the right things for the people that work for you. But seeing it on the front end, you don't typically. I couldn't even imagine 3 years ago people asking during an interview if you had a work from home policy. It just would have been something they'd be like, "I'm not touching that."
Yeah, you're not getting that job, right?
Yeah,
you're
and which I've never really had a problem with. I'm reasonably flexible, and I think that there's a place for that kind of thing. But that was almost a universal question in every single interview. So the world's changed there, right? And the cost has gone up tremendously for the talent. And it's interesting. I don't know if the cost of talent has driven inflation or if inflation drove the cost of talent, but either way, we are here. We're at this point in time where talent's more expensive. And so it was rather eye-opening to see how difficult it was to bring. It's kind of like you ask yourself the question, where did everybody go? Or are they just really happy where they are? Because I was seeing virtually no resumes where I used to get a stack. I used to get a stack when I had a role for a 5 to 8 year type of person. You get a stack of resumes for that.
I know. It's funny you mentioned that. One of my friends has been doing recruiting in the same space for 20 years, and we chat from time to time, and he was bemoaning. He told me, he's like, I think LinkedIn's broken. It's like no one is no one's getting back to me, and what's wrong with LinkedIn? So yeah, you're right. It's just having started in recruiting, I don't know, 4 or so years ago before COVID hit. I feel like I've seen so many different seasons within, I guess, Dallas, and then just hiring in general. So how do you think this shakes out? It seems like in the beginning, candidates definitely had the power, and it was like remote, and there was fear and safety, but definitely feels like we're seeing a shift, especially the bigger companies. You got Jamie Dimon, other people making comments about working from home, isn't ideal. And I'm hearing more and more from candidates saying they're, we're coming back to the office. So now that's certainly, it's very, very depending on who you talk to, but what are your kind of general thoughts on how does this shake out? Do you think candidates are we going to have this hybrid work schedule, and is that the way to retain talent, or is this going to be a fluid ball game, and maybe it's going to shift back to maybe the way it was before, and people need a job, and hiring companies are going to say you got to come to the office or no job?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I am aware of some rather large companies that they've kind of put a line in the sand, if you will, on, hey, I think they've been trying for some time to kind of coax people back in the office, right? Trying to be careful to not effectively create turnover unnecessarily. So there is this balance. But I think my personal belief is you're going to see the current economic uncertainty. Regardless of what people say, we're in a recession. We're at the beginning of a recession. It may not be catastrophic, but we're there. And I think what you're going to see is, the larger companies who are probably going to be making cost decisions anyways. I think they're going to use it as a mechanism to get people back in the office. Hey, it's not going to be as outspoken as like, hey, we're cutting 10% of the workforce. If you want a job, get in the office. But it's going to be a clear cut. Like they're going to act with a little more confidence, I believe, and say, hey, next month, or we're by the end of October, everybody's in the office. If you're not in the office, effectively you're breaking policy. Well, they can, I think, draw that line in the sand if they know they're going to be laying off 10% of their workforce anyways, right? It's going to create a little bit of that turnover, and they're going to have a little more confidence to do it. So I think you're going to see it swing back a little bit. It kind of goes back to the old adage. I'm not quite sure how old you are, but I early in my career, I went through the '08 crisis, and that lasted quite a while. Felt like, it was about a 4 or 5 year until we really, I think, got on the other side of it. But one of the things, I guess, that was, I remember reading or seeing back then was, a lot of companies went to, and I think this is anecdotal, but I think it applies in a different way today. A lot of companies went back to more professional dress. So you see people throwing on sport coats and ties, and it's really not even, I suppose, the companies themselves, it's the employees. They were like, well, how do I differentiate myself and make sure I'm not one of the guys getting let go? Well, I'm gonna button up a little more. I'm gonna tidy up a little more. I think there's that natural draw of like, how do I differentiate myself? And if going into the office differentiates you from some of the folks that aren't going, I'd say get in there and hold on to your seat, because we're going into some uncertain times. So I think you're going to see that. I think it's going to be natural, but I also believe there's an equilibrium, and there is a place for some flexibility. I think any good hiring manager or manager is going to say, hey, 1-2 days a week, work from home, get some flexibility in your life. If it helps out at home, for sure. So I do think that's there, and that's probably going to stay to some degree.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's going to be some flexibility other than the huge companies who maybe have more leverage. But I think the smaller, medium companies there's going to be a balance of, okay, maybe a hybrid work schedule.
Yeah.
Switching gears, I was looking through your background. Some people just seem to have it figured out. You got your bachelor's, your master's, you've been in kind of structured finance, you've been in this space. Where someone like me, when did you kind of know you wanted to be a CFO? And, what advice, if you had to do it over again, would you do it differently? Or what advice are you kind of giving those earlier in their career these days?
On paper, I suppose maybe it presents as if I had it all figured out, right? Certainly did not. As an example, I didn't know I wanted to take an accounting path until I took an accounting course in college. And I was like, man, this really clicks with me. It interests me. I'm not miserable when I'm in class, right? Like, so I was like, okay, that might be a path. So I kind of explore that path a little bit more. Turns out I want to do it. Okay. What's the best way to do it? It's to do the 5-year program. I was at Tech at the time, and the 5-year programs were relatively new. So do the 5-year program. Well, when you're doing the 5-year program, you get recruited by the Big Four. So that was actually right when Arthur Andersen died. So it was an interesting time to be in college too, right? Like the perfect case study of what not to do with Enron and Arthur Andersen. But so go through recruiting with the Big Four, end up at Ernst & Young. So the path was it was like the bricks were being put in front of me as I'm walking, right? Like I'm kind of seeing it as I'm going, as opposed to really looking off in the distance and having an ultimate goal in mind. So I went into public accounting. I did the internship program. I went back, did grad school, went into public accounting. So, great experience, great place to be. And then I, somewhat quickly realized, I think you do, most people do. I realized public accounting wasn't, I didn't love it. It's a grind. It's hard work.
A lot of hours.
Tough. Right. A lot of hours. So kind of found my way out, ended up in Invesco Real Estate, really enjoyed it there. That gave me a chance to do some industry accounting and do a couple other things there. Other opportunities popped up internally that I was able to explore over my 6 years there. And then an opportunity came up at Nation Star Mortgage, which ultimately changed this name to a name that everybody loves, which is Mr. Cooper. So that was where I got a chance to do some structured finance and then FP&A. So, and then ultimately ended up here. So to answer a couple of your questions, so that's kind of my path. But to answer a couple of your questions, is there anything I would kind of change or do differently along the way? And I'd say one of the biggest challenges I had in my career was having patience, and I still struggle with it. Nothing's going to happen overnight. You need to put in the time, and so a point in time where I can say that particularly applied was my time at Ernst & Young. I while I understand public accounting, I experienced it. I would say that my experience there isn't as deep as it needs to be. So that's a place where, if I was giving advice to somebody who's in public accounting is, hey, stick with it for a while. Let it be a real shining spot on your resume as opposed to just a small placeholder.
Stop. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's because it's critical. It applies in almost, it doesn't matter what role you go into. If you're in accounting and finance, if you have the auditing foundation, you're gonna be able to apply it, and it's gonna show well. So that's that patience is something I've struggled with all the way through my career, and even at other stops. What I would tend to do is go into a new role or new opportunity, and dig in, spend a year or two doing it, and then go, what's next, right? And
I mastered this. I'm ready.
And that can be a challenge, especially if the next opportunity isn't necessarily in front of you, or then sometimes you might find yourself, kind of in that grass is greener kind of mentality, and sometimes it's better to just let it come to you. And those opportunities where I've slowed it down a little bit, learned from those moments where I did get a little impatient, and then let things come to me. I find that's while maybe not perfect, it really things do happen. If you're working hard, you're reasonably intelligent, and you're trying to drive value for the organization you're in, people are going to notice, and you're going to get opportunities from that. So, my career path is I'm really proud of where I've been and what I've been able to accomplish and the things I've been able to do. But there's definitely some things to be learned there, and some things I've tried to apply as I've gone through. But patience for young people it's hard. I know it's hard, but it's one of those things. Just stick with it.
That's great advice, and I think the poor decisions I've made career wise have been due to impatience and just I'm ready, and just get me out of here. I'm ready for what's next, and then you get there, and then you think everything through. But that's great advice. And then spending time in the Big Four. Yeah, anytime you've got a candidate that's got 4+ years in the Big Four, it's lots of love for that experience.
Yes,
in my experience.
Yep.
Well, great. Well, Adam, it's been really great talking with you, and appreciate your time. Do you have any final comments on the market or anything? But really great hearing your thoughts on the market and just learning more about Park Cities.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's good catching up, and I've felt fortunate, us having an opportunity to work together previously.
Absolutely, same here. Thank you.
So it having familiarity with you and being able to you helped us attract some of the talent that we were looking for, which is really critical, and has been extremely great for us. But I would say, just generally speaking, if we're going to look at the overall landscape, the overall market, what we believe and what we look at, I would say, hopefully people don't panic, right? And we don't want the extremes, and we don't want the whiplash that we've had, it just seems like it's all over the place with things right now. Things happen fast, and things change fast, and hopefully, people stick with it and realize that the sun will come up tomorrow and things are going to be okay. And, economically, there's challenges. Everybody feels challenges. And, hopefully the inflation gets under, I think the biggest threat for us all right now is the inflation, right? If that gets under control, everybody can breathe and say, okay, give us some time. I think time will kind of help cure it. I think the inflation driving up interest rates is going to be a challenge for the real estate and mortgage market. But that's to be expected after you burn so hot for so long in a market like that. You're probably going to stagnate a little bit. I do think it's kind of unprecedented times. I don't know that anybody could tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, but I always kind of try to look at it. It's like all relative, right? If the world's burning around you, is your place hotter than the guy next door? I don't know. Just try to make sure it's not that hot.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in 2008, I remember Googling about, what if the banks fail? What does that mean? And just the people that kept cool heads and didn't panic, we made it through that. And there's investments to be made and decisions to be made.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And
you bet.
talk to you again soon.
All right. Sounds good.